Now, time for today's focus on the programme. And the Ivory Coast has been reporting record economic growth for several years, yet its people are still leaving the country in ever greater numbers. Many cite poverty and unemployment as they head to Europe in the hope of making a better life for themselves. For some, the journey is cut short and they're sent back to the country of origin. Returning home often very difficult, as it comes with a sense of failure and rejection as well from their loved ones. Well, our correspondents Thais Brooke and Frank Hersey in Ivory Coast went to meet some of these returnees.
This is the story of two Africans lost in the Sahara. The piece, entitled You Don't Understand Me, uses humour to probe the dreams that fuel clandestine migration.
Dis-moi, mon ami, quand on sera là-bas, quel travail tu feras?
Je t'ai déjà dit que ce n'est pas une question d'emploi, mais de dignité.
Moi, je me ferai une belle femme blanche.
An economic migrant and a political refugee. The reasons behind why people decide to leave Ivory Coast are subject to debate.
The situation here should make it possible for people to achieve what they want to achieve. So why do they leave? Why can't they make their dreams come true here? We wanted to ask these questions and draw everyone's attention to the situation, as we're getting to the point where the problem is getting out of hand.
It's the Ivory Coast contradiction. While its economy is one of the most dynamic in Africa, ever more of its people are setting out into the desert towards the Mediterranean to reach Europe. Historically a country that has welcomed migrants, it has now become a departure point. But all too often, this adventure turns sour. Images of Ivorians being sold as slaves in Libya sent a shockwave throughout Ivory Coast. Nado Nyapo spent almost 6 months in a Libyan prison.
Every morning they would come. We were there watching, but we didn't know what was happening. They often took people, and these people never came back. They took girls, but these girls never came back. One day, we were told that they were taking people to sell them.
He managed to escape and avoid almost certain death. Nado Nyapo is now safely back in Abidjan. We meet him one evening at a ground, a kind of gathering place here in Ivory Coast, where everyone can speak their mind. He's taking part in a workshop on the dangers of illegal migration. He shares his experiences as a warning to those considering leaving.
If you have a job here in Ivory Coast where you're paid over 300 euros a month, I think you're better off staying here, because in Europe you have to pay taxes. And the reality is that if you don't have any papers, you'll have to hide. That means when you go home after work, you're going to be stressed the whole time. So what advice do I have for my brothers? Stay here and get organized.
Nado Nyapo was lucky to be accepted again by his family. For many, the hell of the journey is followed by the nightmare of their return. Cynthia Ekra is running the workshop. She brings up the case of a returnee who became pregnant after being gang raped in Libya.
This young woman, when she returned, those same parents who'd encouraged her to set out on her journey, at the airport, they shunned her.
The feeling of failure, debts that can't be repaid. Having someone return home is shameful for families. Kamati Kadi wanted to join her husband, an undocumented worker in Italy. She embarked on a makeshift boat with her 5-year-old daughter and drifted for 3 days without food or water. The Libyan Coast Guard rescued them and they were repatriated.
When I got back to Ivory Coast and returned to my old neighbourhood, they'd point at me and say, "That's the one who got to Libya, but didn't make it." I was ashamed of myself.
Kamati Kadi now lives with her mother, who is glad her daughter is alive, but has struggled with her return.
My ex-husband managed to get to France with a child from one of his other wives. My daughter and I stayed behind, and now he's rejected us. I'd like for her to leave again because the family criticizes us and says we're useless.
And so, Kamati Kadi is looking for another way to get to Europe. More so than economic reasons, it's social pressure that is forcing people to leave Ivory Coast. Despite the workshops and warnings, despite the images of sinking ships off the coast of Libya, it's the dream of that other place, the promise of riches and success, that still prevails.
Thais Brooke and Frank Hersey reporting for Focus today.